Welcome! In this video I'm going to show you how I do what I am going to call the gentle waves quilting design. I like to use this design as an all-over freehand design, and when I get finished with the quilt, this pattern almost looks like a freehand pantograph. This pattern is very easy to stitch, it's quick, and it always looks great. I really enjoy quilting this pattern on charity quilts, which is what I'm going to be doing in the video. This is a quilt that will be for American Hero Quilts. They are an organization that gives quilts to active duty wounded service people. I've been working with this charity for a number of years, and if you are looking for a great cause to quilt quilts and to make quilts, I would highly recommend them. I'm going to be quilting this design literally from the left raw edge to the right raw edge. Because of the way how the quilt is and the colors of the thread and everything else, I want to draw out the pattern before I do the quilting. I have some plexiglass on top of my quilt, and I am going to be drawing with an Expo Bright Stick marker so that you can see my designs. We're going to assume that the plexiglass is the workspace of our quilt. Way up here is the top of my workspace, and at the very bottom of the screen is the bottom of my workspace. Most of the time when we do our quilting, we start at the top of our workspace, work down to the bottom. But in this case, I want to start in the middle of my workspace. Assuming that the zebra stripe duct tape is my batting, I want to bring my bobbin thread up right on the very left raw edge of my quilt. And once I have my thread secured, I'm going to stitch a long, curvy, wavy line all the way over to the other end, which I would end right here, assuming that my duct tape here is the right raw edge of my quilt. Now I can either make a point here or I can come up just a little bit. I'm going to come back and quilt a second line, which is a sort of echo, but it doesn't have to be exact. And also notice I'm not like a quarter of an inch away, because this is going to be a bigger space. I'm going to have my quote-unquote echo lines be at least an inch away from each other, if not a little bit more. So continuing on, I would come here. Now I'm going to travel up a little bit. You have to determine how much is a little bit. And now I'm going to come back and I'm going to start stitching again, going almost opposite what I did before. You can see that I have kind of a bigger space here and a bigger space here. Now you can come down or you can go up. Because I can, I'm going to go up. I'm going to again do some echo lines all the way back. Now that I'm at the left raw edge again, now I'm going to come down a little bit so I can get in position to stitch this area. Once I'm there, I can sneak in here, and I like to make a point here, come back, stop, go backwards, make another point on the inside, and then come back and go back out to where I started. I'm right here. Now I can travel down, and if I want to, I can make another row of echo quilting, going all the way over to the edge, and then coming back, and then making a bigger space again, coming back up, going back in, around. I could probably leave that right here, but I think I might come in, do another point, come back out just to fill that up. And now that I'm here, I can come down and go across again a couple more times. Believe it or not, that's about all there is to this pattern. I'm going to continue filling in my workspace, but if you remember, I have a space up here at the top of my quilt. My assumption is this is the top raw edge of the quilt. As you're working your way down the quilt, you're not going to have another straight edge. You'll have a curved edge where you will connect up your second workspace, third workspace, whatever, into there. But back at the top, a lot of times I don't even have to worry about breaking my thread. I can just travel up the side no matter where I'm at, whether I'm on the left side, the right side, doesn't make any difference. And now I'm just going to come up into here, going to come around, do a little bit of that echo quilting, come back. If I need to, I can go out into my batting, come back down, maybe come up a little bit, fill that up, and just do something like that, just so that the space gets filled in and you don't have any unquilted, what I'm going to call dead spaces. This pattern gives a ton of texture. And like I said, it is really, really easy to do. So I'm going to start quilting this. My machine's in position, I've pulled up my bobbin thread, I've secured it, and I'm ready to start stitching. So here we go. From here, I'm going to start stitching a curved line all the way across my quilt. I don't know if you can see it, but my stitching line comes right like that. I'm using a high sheen polyester variegated thread that's a combination of some light blue, a little bit of pink, and a little bit of silver. On the printed fabrics, it's blending in really nicely, and I'm hoping you can see it on the dark blue here. I'm at my raw edge. I'm going to stitch up a little bit, and then I'm going to stitch back across, following my previous line of stitching, echoing away from it about an inch or so. I'm back at my left raw edge. Now I'm going to stitch here. I'm going to make this stitching line coming down this way so it's opposite of what I've previously quilted. And I'm going to work my way all the way back over to the right raw edge. I'm at the right raw edge, and here's the line I just stitched. Here, up here is the line I previously stitched. I'm going to fill this in and then work my way back across to the left raw edge. When I start my stitching, I'm going to come up a little bit. I'm going to come into about here, because this is where my two lines of stitching are fairly close right here. And then from here, I'm going to come back up over here, come back. Now I'm going to have a little space in the middle here, so now I can come through that space and then come in between these two lines of stitching that are a little bit narrower to get me into the next space that I need to fill in. And here I go. I'm now between this stitching line right here and this stitching line right here, and I'm going to travel between that into the next wide space that I need to fill with stitching, which is right in here, and you're probably not going to be able to see the thread, but trust me, it's there. As I'm looking at the area that I'm quilting here, it's not as large as that first area that I quilted. From where I'm at, I'm just going to do another line of stitching between these two lines of stitching right here to get me into the next space that I need to fill. And I'm going to continue that way all the way over to the left raw edge. I ended up here. Now I'm going to go up and I'm going to work on filling up the space above where I started up to the top raw edge of the quilt. And I'm going to continue doing that the same way that I did here, making those wavy stitching lines and then filling in the wider spaces. I'm going to continue doing this top edge of the quilt. I'm going to do that off camera, and when I get that area finished, I will show you what it looks like. I have the camera off the tripod, and I've got the top half of my workspace all quilted, and I'm just going to go across the top of the quilt really quick to show you what this looks like. Right now I can see more quilting on the dark than I was expecting, and it's looking really nice. So starting at the left edge, let's go across, and there's the first couple of blocks. I'm loving the movement of that quilting, and that's about the middle of the quilt. And I'm going across some more, and there is the right raw edge and the border, and I am loving that texture. And now I'm going to move the quilt up, and we're going to work on the next workspace. I've moved my quilt up so that I'm in the next workspace, and I have my plexiglass back on my quilt top, And the lines that you're seeing that are already drawn, those are the stitching lines at the bottom of the previous workspace. Since these stitching lines are already established, now it's just a matter of working our way down instead of up. So what I would do is I would come over here, assuming that's the left raw edge, bringing up my bobbin thread, and somewhere in here I'd come up, and again kind of doing that opposites, maybe coming back with a second line of echo quilting, and then snaking my way into here, coming back maybe up, across, down, through, and doing the same thing over here, going up, back. If you have enough space, you might do another back and forth, or in this case it looks like there's just enough for that third line of stitching in there. That fills that up really nice, and I'm ready to get into my next area as I'm working my way across the quilt. And again, just filling this up back and forth, left to right, as you're going along. If these bigger spaces get a little wonky, that's okay. That just makes it part of the quilt. You might think it's wonky. Anybody else looking at that is probably going to say, oh, what a wonderful quilter she is. I am going to continue stitching my quilt. If I run into any problems, I will let you know, and when I get down to the bottom, I will show you what I'm going to do at the bottom. This is fun and relatively stress-free quilting. And this is quilting that's going to look good no matter how you do it. So I am going to get to quilting. I've worked my way down to the bottom of the quilt. I do have my plexiglass on my quilt top, and these drawn lines on the plexiglass is the stitching lines that I've already stitched. This area in the border has not been stitched yet. And I'm going to just draw in really quickly how I would quilt this. Whether you start at the left raw edge or the right raw edge, it really doesn't make any difference. But keeping the same kind of spacing that you've been doing throughout your quilt, you want to come in and we're going to stitch like this and maybe go across to the other side, and then we'll come back like this. And then I'm just going to fill in this hump here, maybe come over like this, fill that in, fill that back, and then continue on my way, in this case, towards the left. And when this gets all quilted up, it's going to look just the same as what you did in the top half of the quilt. A lot of times when I'm working this bottom edge, I think of this as almost like half of one of those wide spots that I've already done previously. And again, if you keep that wave going and keep your spacing somewhat the same as what you've already done, this is all going to blend in. I'm going to quilt this bottom border off camera, and then I will show you what it looks like. I finished quilting that bottom border and going across the quilt really quickly just to show you what it looks like. And I love how that thread shows up on that darker blue. And I don't know if you can see it, but that hint of variegation looks really, really nice. And just a little bit more of the quilt, getting over to the right raw edge. There's the corner, and it's looking good. The quilt is finished, and I've trimmed it, no binding yet, and I have it hanging outside, and I just wanted to show you what it looks like. And actually that's a really nice piecing pattern, super simple, and it looks great all the way down to the bottom. I'm going across the top fairly quickly. I'm not going to show you the whole quilt close up because I just want you to get the idea. And here is a really quick close view, and hopefully you can see the stitching. But don't worry, I'm going to turn the quilt around and we'll see what the back looks like. I've turned the quilt around, and the backing is a really nice kind of lightly marbled navy blue. And the variegated thread that I used really stands out and gives a ton of texture to the back. And just really quickly, starting at the top, just scanning down to the bottom, where my cat Miss Kitty is playing. I'm at the top of the quilt, and I'm sure you can see all that texture, all those waves. This is looking amazing. It's all freehand, it's all very organic, and the best thing is that it does not take a long time to quilt this. And if your waves or your wide sections, whatever you want to call it, is not exactly the same as the other one, it's no big deal. And just one more real quick, going from the top down to the bottom with a little bit of breeze, so the quilt is moving and the cat's moved, and that quilt is looking great. And I will put the binding on it, and I will be donating it to American Hero Quilts.